The aircraft yawed hard left before the screaming started, and I knew from the sound of it that the cockpit had taken something bad. I was in the forward troop compartment of the MC-144 with 7 other operators, 90 minutes out from target, belted into the bench seats along the fuselage wall with our gear staged at our feet, and the ambient roar of the turboprops filling the space between us and the conversation we weren't having. The mission brief was complete. The team had gone quiet the way teams go quiet when there's nothing left to do but go through the door, and the flight had been steady and professional for the full crossing, the kind of crew competence that lets you stop thinking about the platform entirely and put your attention where it belongs. Then the left side shuddered with an impact I recognized, a sound I had heard on 2 previous combat flights when something structural took a significant hit, and the aircraft rolled into a diving bank that did not correct. For a full second nobody moved. Then the training took over and the noise started. Our team leader, Master Chief Warrant Drayson, was out of his harness before the motion fully registered. He crossed to the cockpit intercom panel on the forward bulkhead and keyed it twice. Nothing came back from the flight deck. He worked the circuit breaker, tried the secondary switch panel, ran his hand across the breaker row. Still nothing. He pulled the cockpit door and stood in the opening for 3 seconds, and then he came back to us with what he'd found. Both pilots were hit. The co-pilot had taken a round through the shoulder and was unconscious in the right seat. The pilot in command was conscious, but his left arm was not functioning, and his hands were not on the controls. The aircraft was in a shallow diving left turn. Without correction, it was going to tighten and deepen into something it could not recover from, and the window for correcting it was narrowing with every second we spent standing in the compartment. Drayson scanned the 8 of us on the benches. He did not waste a syllable. Both pilots are hit. Aircraft is in a turn. He looked down the row, 8 experienced combat operators, none of us with the training the moment required. I need someone who can fly an MC-144 right now. Does anyone here know how to fly this aircraft? Nobody moved. The deck tilted another degree underfoot. He asked it again, harder. Anyone, any fixed-wing time, anything at all. Does anyone on this aircraft know how to fly? In the second row of seats, 3 positions down from me, a woman stood up slowly. I had not given her particular attention during the flight. She had boarded in Sector C with a 4-person logistics element moving equipment cases forward, and she had spent the 90 minutes with a tablet in her lap and a set of headphones on, reading what appeared to be technical documentation. Standard flight suit, day bag, no visible rank insignia that I had registered, no conversation with the team. She looked, for the entire flight up to that moment, exactly like a passenger filling a seat on a support aircraft between assignments. "I can fly her," she said. No hesitation in it. No upward inflection making it a question. She stated it the way you state something when you know it to be factually true, and there is no particular reason to make it dramatic. Drayson looked at her for 1 full second, while the deck tilted another 3 degrees. "Get up there," he said. She came past 3 of us toward the cockpit with the rolling balance of someone accustomed to moving through aircraft that are not steady underfoot, and she had the door pulled open before I finished getting my harness off. I followed her and crouched in the doorway because the pilot in command needed someone beside him, and I was the nearest body. What she did in that cockpit over the next 22 minutes I want to describe precisely, because I have told this account to several people, and the telling tends to drift toward something more dramatic than what actually happened, and the dramatic version consistently misses the point. She did not rush. She sat down in the left seat, scanned the instrument panel with the efficiency of someone reading a page they have read many times, and put both hands on the controls. The input she made was small, not a corrective grab, but a measured, deliberate contact. The yoke moved perhaps 2 inches. The left bank arrested. I watched the attitude indicator needle climb back toward wings level before I had fully processed that she was in command of the aircraft. The nose came up. The descent rate slowed. In 45 seconds we were straight, level, and in a gentle climb. Altitude, she said. The pilot in command told her we were at 9,300 feet and climbing. She cross-checked the altimeter against the VSI and made a small adjustment to the elevator trim. Nearest suitable field. He gave her render station, 41 minutes northwest. She acknowledged it, made a heading correction that I watched her calculate from the compass card and the wind correction data already entered in the navigation panel, and keyed the emergency frequency. Her voice on the radio was the same as her voice in the troop compartment level, unhurried, specific. She transmitted the aircraft type, souls aboard, nature of the emergency, position, and estimated time to render in approximately 10 seconds. Then, just before releasing the transmit key, she added, "Stormbreaker, that is my call sign for your records." I did not understand at that moment why she added it. I found out later. The emergency channel responded in under 15 seconds, the controller at render station clearing traffic and pulling up the approach data. Then a second voice came on the frequency, the supervisor, with a noticeably different register. "Stormbreaker, this is render operations. Confirm you are at the controls of Rover 9er. "Confirmed," she said. A pause on the emergency channel that lasted 3 full seconds. Then, "Render station is yours, Stormbreaker. All traffic holding. Wind 280 at 12, runway 29, cleared direct." The pilot in command shifted in the right seat and looked at her with an expression that was part pain and part something else. "Your reputation gets to the field before you do," he said, keeping his voice dry despite everything. "Stay with me," she told him. "I need you to talk me through the approach lighting at render when we get close. Can you do that?" He said he could. He talked. She listened and flew. She configured the aircraft for the approach in sequence, methodically, calling each item and verifying it even though she was running the checklist alone. Fuel state, hydraulics, flap schedule, approach speed, gear. The co-pilot was still unconscious in the right seat, and she reached across him once to check a circuit on the secondary panel, her eyes returning to the attitude indicator before her arm had fully come back to her side. When the landing gear deployed and locked, I heard the 3 green tones from the doorway, and let out a breath I had been holding since the first bank. The runway at render station appeared through the windscreen at exactly the altitude it should have appeared. She flew the glide path with inputs so small I had to watch the control column carefully to see them at all. The mains touched the runway with the precision of a landing that was placed rather than arrived at, not hard, not floating long, but settled onto the numbers the way a careful person sets something fragile down on the right spot. She rolled the aircraft out, turned at the first available exit, and stopped on the emergency ramp where the medical vehicles were already staged in a line with their lights turning. She sat back in the left seat and let one slow breath out through her nose. The cockpit was quiet except for the cooling engines and the sounds of the crew assembling outside. She was looking at the instrument panel with an expression I did not know how to name precisely, not relief, not pride, something quieter than either. The stillness of a person who has completed what the moment required and is releasing it cleanly, the way a clean knot releases when the right cord is pulled. I came fully into the cockpit as the medics came through for the pilot in command. She was already out of the left seat, stepping back to make room, her movements reduced to exactly what the situation needed and nothing extra. She stood against the side panel and watched until both pilots were clear, and then she turned toward the door. Drayson stepped into the doorway and stood directly in front of her. In 4 years of working alongside this man, I have watched him operate with a focused professional precision that has very little room in it for anything outside the mission. He is not a person who stops mid-process to address someone outside his chain of command. He stopped now. He put himself squarely in front of her. "Who are you?" he said. She told him the call sign she had given the radio. I watched him work through it. 3, maybe 4 seconds, the look of a man who has heard a name in a context so far from where he expected to encounter it that the pieces take real time to fit together. Then they fit. "I know that name," he said. His voice was different, not softer but recalibrated, honest in a specific way. "I know it well. Most people who spent time in military aviation over the last decade do," she said. "No pride in it and no apology. A statement of plain fact." He held her gaze for another full moment. Then he did something I have seen Drayson do perhaps 3 times in 4 years. He squared his shoulders and looked her in the face. "Thank you," he said. 2 words in the full weight of their meaning, not a formula, not professional courtesy, but the acknowledgement one person gives another who has just done something that saved 8 lives, said as plainly as a man knows how to say it. "Get your pilot to the surgeons," she said. "He talked me through the approach with a broken arm and he kept it together the whole way down." She paused. "That mattered as much as anything I did." She walked off the aircraft into the afternoon light on the render station ramp, where a ground crew vehicle was waiting at the foot of the stairs. She climbed in without looking back, and the vehicle drove away down the taxi line, and we stood on the ramp in the settling heat and watched it go, and none of us said anything for a while. That evening, I found the render station operations officer and asked him about the call sign she had given on the emergency frequency. He looked at me for a moment, the expression of a person who realizes they are talking to someone missing a piece of broadly shared knowledge. "Stormbreaker," he said, "you're telling me you were on that aircraft and did not know that call sign?" I told him I had not known it. He told me what he knew. She had accumulated over 4,000 hours in military fixed-wing and rotary platforms across a 12-year active career before moving into a role that took her off the flight line. Twice, she had been the finishing pilot on cross-country speed record attempts in her aircraft class. The call sign had been given to her by her first squadron, not self-selected, but assigned by the unit based on what they saw in her, and it had followed her through every posting since. She maintained her flight currency on her personal time and at her own expense. She always maintained it. The controller at render station had cleared all traffic from the approach pattern the moment her call sign came across the frequency, not in response to the emergency declaration, in response to the name. The woman in the second row of seats, who had boarded quietly with a logistics element and spent 90 minutes reading technical documentation with her headphones on, was not a logistics passenger filling a seat. She had been the most experienced aviator on that aircraft from the moment she boarded. Not one of us had looked at her twice. I think about that second-row seat often. I think about it during briefings and during the long, quiet portions of transit flights when there is nothing pressing to occupy the mind. I think about the 90 minutes I sat in the same troop compartment with her and did not think to look at who she was. She had not offered her background. She had not introduced herself to the team. She had read her documentation and kept to herself, and when the moment arrived she stood up and said she could fly the aircraft, and she went forward and flew it. She put it on the numbers and stepped out of the seat and gave credit to the man who had talked her down. The call sign on the emergency frequency was the only introduction she gave. At render station, it was introduction enough. After that flight, it was enough for all of us. Drayson briefed the team the next morning before the replacement aircraft arrived. He told them what the operations officer had told me, and he told them that the lesson was not about her record or her call sign. The lesson was about what we had failed to look at for 90 minutes. 8 trained operators who make their living on detailed observation had looked at a woman in a flight suit reading a tablet and formed a complete and entirely wrong picture. He said that once. He did not say it again. He did not need to.